Most people who are stuck financially aren't confused, aren't unmotivated, and definitely aren't irresponsible. In fact, most of them look like they're doing everything right. Showing up, paying bills, handling what needs to be handled. And that's exactly why nothing changes. Because what looks like discipline is often something else. It's not panic. It's not failure. It's freeze. And freeze doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like functioning while your life quietly stops expanding. That's not laziness. That's a nervous system response. And it has a cost, whether you ever name it or not. Today we're going to talk about why capable adults freeze around money, and why calling it procrastination keeps the problem locked in place. Freeze is not a mindset. It's not a belief. It's not a lack of willpower. And it's not something you fix by trying harder. Freeze is what happens when your nervous system decides that movement is riskier than staying exactly where you are. And here's the part most people never understand: freeze doesn't shut you down. It keeps you functional. You still wake up. You still go to work. You still pay what's due. You still respond to messages. You still do what's required. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. That's why freeze goes unnoticed for so long. Because collapse is obvious. Panic is obvious. Failure is obvious. Freeze is quiet. It's efficiency without expansion. Your system isn't asking, how do I build something better? It's asking something far more basic: how do I not make this worse? And that question shapes everything. What freeze actually looks like when someone is frozen financially: they don't stop acting. They stop initiating. They stop making decisions that introduce uncertainty. They default to maintaining, monitoring, waiting, optimizing the familiar. They don't feel reckless. They feel responsible. But responsibility without movement turns into stagnation. Not overnight. Gradually. That's why frozen adults often say things like, "I'm just being careful. Now isn't the right time. I don't want to make a mistake. I'll revisit this once things settle." None of that sounds irrational. That's what makes freeze dangerous. Why freeze is misdiagnosed as laziness. Laziness implies a choice. Freeze isn't a choice. It's a protective response. When your nervous system associates money with exposure, judgment, pressure, irreversible consequences, it doesn't push you forward. It slows everything down. Not to sabotage you, but to keep you safe. The problem is, what keeps you safe short-term often costs you freedom long-term. And because freeze still lets you function, you don't feel alarmed. You feel contained. The hidden cost of staying functional: freeze doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up as delayed decisions, overthinking small moves, avoiding irreversible choices, choosing relief over range. Nothing explodes. But something shrinks. Your optionality. Your leverage. Your future room to maneuver. And because you're still doing fine, no one tells you something is wrong. Including you. This is why motivation fails. You can't motivate your way out of freeze. Because motivation assumes agency. Freeze happens before agency. It's a physiological break, not a psychological excuse. That's why advice feels heavy. Why action feels expensive. Why clarity increases pressure instead of freedom. Your system isn't resisting progress. It's resisting threat. And until that's addressed, every attempt to push forward will feel like self-betrayal. Where this leaves us: so if you've been telling yourself, "Why can't I just move? What's wrong with me? Other people handle this fine." Stop. Nothing is wrong with you. You're not lazy. You're not broken. And you're not behind. You're frozen. And freeze follows rules. Which means it can be understood. And once understood, it can be interrupted. But not the way most people try. Because the next layer is where almost everyone makes it worse. And that's what we need to talk about next. Here's where most capable adults make the problem worse. They notice the freeze. They name it. And then they try to override it. They tell themselves things like, I just need to be more disciplined. I need a better system. I should push through this. I can't afford to stay stuck. That instinct makes sense. But it backfires. Because freeze isn't a lack of effort. It's a safety response. And safety responses don't dissolve under pressure. They intensify. When you try to force movement while your nervous system still reads danger, your system doesn't hear motivation. It hears threat. And threat doesn't create action. It creates tightening. This is why so many people say, I understand what's happening now, but I feel even more stuck. That's not regression. That's escalation. Awareness arrived before safety. And awareness without safety doesn't free you. It corners you. Now you don't just feel the tension. You notice it. Every delayed decision feels heavier. Every moment of waiting feels louder. Every relief-based choice feels exposed. Not because you're failing, but because you removed ignorance without removing threat. From the nervous system's perspective, things actually got worse. Before, avoidance was automatic. Now it's conscious. And conscious avoidance feels like danger. Here's the paradox almost no one sees: awareness increases responsibility before it increases capacity. You now feel responsible to act. But your body still associates action with exposure. So the system does what it always does under exposure. It looks for relief. Monitoring. Waiting. Overthinking. Choosing the option that quiets the sensation again. Not because you're weak. Because relief still works. And as long as relief works faster than capacity, freeze stays in place. This is also why advice becomes unbearable at this stage. Advice assumes agency. Freeze happens before agency. So frameworks feel heavy. Steps feel risky. Action feels like pressure instead of possibility. And that's when people turn the blame inward. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just move? Other people don't struggle like this. Nothing is wrong with you. You didn't fail to act. You tried to act from the same internal position that created the freeze in the first place. And that can't work. Because you don't exit freeze by pushing harder. You exit it by changing where decisions come from. That's the layer almost no one is taught. And it's the difference between forcing movement and restoring agency. Which brings us to the only real exit point. The place inside you where decisions stop being about relief and start being about range. That's what we need to build next. Most people are never taught this part. You don't exit freeze by convincing yourself to act. You exit freeze by changing where decisions come from. As long as decisions are made from threat, your system will always prioritize relief. Even if you understand the pattern. Even if you want change. Even if the cost is obvious. Because threat doesn't care about insight. It cares about survival. So the real shift is not behavioral. It's positional. Freeze ends when your nervous system stops asking, how do I make this feeling stop? And starts asking a different question, what can I afford to tolerate, without escaping it? That question sounds subtle. It isn't. It's the difference between reacting and choosing. Between relief and range. This is what most people mistake for confidence. But confidence isn't required. Margin is. Margin is the internal space that allows discomfort without collapse. It's the buffer that lets uncertainty exist without triggering shutdown. From margin, decisions don't feel urgent. They feel available. Not because the risk disappeared, but because the system is no longer cornered. Here's how you know you're deciding from margin. The decision still feels uncomfortable. But it doesn't feel dangerous. You don't feel calm. You feel steady. You don't feel certain. You feel oriented. That's agency. Agency is not bravery. It's not willpower. It's the ability to stay present without needing immediate relief. And here's the critical point most people miss: margin is not created by money first. It's created by tolerating the absence of relief long enough for your system to learn something new. That movement doesn't equal threat. That discomfort doesn't equal loss. That delay doesn't equal danger. Once the body learns that, the freeze loosens, naturally. Not because you forced it, but because the reason for freezing is gone. This is why people who restore agency say things like, "I still don't love this decision, but I can move. I don't feel safe, but I don't feel trapped. I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not frozen." That's not motivation. That's capacity. And capacity compounds. Because once one decision comes from margin, the next one costs less. And the next costs less again. Until movement stops feeling like betrayal and starts feeling honest. This is where the arc closes. Not with action. With position. Because once decisions stop being made from threat, relief loses its authority. And freeze loses its job. Starting tomorrow, we're going to take this out of theory and into real money decisions. Not big ones. Not dramatic ones. The small, binary choices people keep making every week without realizing what they're choosing for. Once you can see that decision clearly, everything downstream changes. That's where the clear money brain actually begins.